Dr. Elena Martinez had been staring at the same screen for 12 hours straight. Her eyes burned and her coffee had gone cold 3 times already. The Kepler research station was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of the life support systems. She was the only person awake at this hour, monitoring the deep space radio telescopes that searched for signs of alien life. For 17 years, Elena had worked at this station. Every day she listened to the sounds of space, hoping to hear something that would prove humans were not alone in the universe. Every day she heard nothing but cosmic noise, radiation from distant stars, and the empty silence of the void. Tonight was different. The signal came through at 3:47 a.m. station time. At first, Elena thought it was just another equipment malfunction. The computers had been acting up lately, and false alarms were common.
Ow.
But as she watched the data stream across her monitors, she realized this was something else entirely. The signal was weak, barely stronger than background radiation. It pulsed in a pattern that made Elena's heart race. 3 short pulses, 3 long pulses, 3 short pulses again. Even a child would recognize it as the universal distress signal. But this was coming from deep space, from a region where no human ship had ever traveled. Elena's hands shook as she began recording the transmission. The signal was complex, far more sophisticated than simple Morse code. Mathematical sequences flowed through the data stream, followed by what looked like star charts and navigation coordinates. Whoever was sending this message knew exactly where they were and wanted others to find them. The transmission lasted for 47 minutes. When it ended, Elena played it back immediately, her mind racing as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The mathematics were elegant, using prime numbers and geometric relationships that any intelligent species would recognize. But mixed in with the universal language were sections that seemed to describe technology, biology, and most disturbing of all, weapons. Elena reached for her communication device with trembling fingers. She needed to wake up Captain Jake Morrison immediately. It's the Aurora. An exploration vessel was currently docked at the station for routine maintenance. Morrison and his crew were the closest thing to a military response team that the Outer Rim had. Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Martinez at Kepler Station. I need you to come to my lab immediately. We have a situation. Morrison's voice was groggy, but alert. What kind of situation, Doctor? The kind that changes everything, Elena replied. I've received a transmission from an alien civilization. They're in trouble and they're asking for help. 20 minutes later, Morrison arrived at Elena's lab with 3 of his senior officers. The captain was a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too many years in the darkness of space. Behind him stood Communications Officer Lisa Powell, Chief Engineer Ryan Carter, and Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez. Elena played the transmission for them without explanation. As the alien signal filled the room, she watched their faces change from skepticism to amazement to growing concern. The mathematical patterns were beautiful, but there was something desperate about the way they repeated certain sequences. Far away, are they? Morrison asked, when the recording ended. Elena pulled up her star charts on the main display. The coordinates they provided put them approximately 200 light-years from here, in the direction of the galactic core. That's far beyond the range of any human vessel. Lisa Powell was already working on her portable computer, running the alien mathematics through translation programs. Captain, I'm seeing repeated references to time measurements, if I'm reading this correctly. They're operating on some kind of countdown? The numbers suggest they have less than 72 hours before something catastrophic happens. What kind of catastrophic? Rodriguez asked. Elena highlighted a section of the transmission on her screen. As part of the message shows energy signatures, massive ones. The readings suggest a fleet of warships, possibly hundreds of them, converging on the alien's location. Morrison studied the data with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 30 years in space. You're telling me that an alien civilization is under attack, and they're asking us for help? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Elena said. But there's more. They've included detailed specifications for some kind of hyperspace amplification system. If their mathematics are correct, this technology could boost our jump drives far beyond anything we've ever achieved. Carter leaned forward, his engineer's mind already working through the implications. How far beyond? Elena pulled up another section of the transmission. They're showing us how to reach their location in less than 40 hours. The power requirements would be enormous, and the stress on our ships would be incredible, but it's theoretically possible. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had been searching for alien life for over a century. When they finally found it, it was calling for help in a war that humans couldn't possibly win. Morrison made his decision quickly. "Doctor, I need you to prepare a complete analysis of this transmission. I want everything, the star charts, the technology specifications, the energy readings, all of it. Powell, get me a priority channel to Earth Command." Rodriguez, start. "Pulling together everything we know about deep space navigation," Captain Carter said quietly. "Even if we could reach them, what could we do? One ship against hundreds?" Morrison looked at the alien signal still playing on Elena's screen. Mathematical patterns seemed to pulse with a rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat, growing weaker with each repetition. "We'll figure that out when we get there," he said. "But we can't just ignore this. These beings trusted us enough to share their technology and their location. The least we can do is try to help them," Lena continued, analyzing the transmission. As Morrison's crew began making preparations, the more she studied the alien mathematics, the more impressed she became. These beings had achieved scientific breakthroughs that human scientists had only dreamed of. Their understanding of physics, biology, and engineering was centuries ahead of anything in human databases. But there was something else in the transmission that worried her. Hidden in the complex mathematical sequences were what appeared to be historical records. Images of worlds turned to ash, star systems stripped of all life, species after species falling to an enemy that showed no mercy. The aliens weren't just under attack. They were facing extinction at the hands of something that had been systematically destroying intelligent life across the galaxy for generations. The enemy fleet wasn't just conquering territory, it was wiping out entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Elena's analysis revealed that the attacking force used weapons that human science could barely comprehend. Energy beams that could crack planets, gravity weapons that could collapse stars, and worst of all, biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. This enemy had been perfecting the art of genocide for over 1,000 years. As the hours passed, more details emerged from the alien transmission. The beings calling for help called themselves the Villani, and they had been fighting this war for 3 generations. Their homeworld Desha was one of the last strongholds of their civilization. If it fell, the Villani would join the dozens of other species that had already been erased from existence. The countdown timer in their message now showed less than 60 hours remaining. Soon, the enemy fleet would arrive at the Isha, and another chapter in the galaxy's history would come to a violent end, unless the humans could somehow find a way to help. Alina looked up from her computer screens as Morrison returned to her lab. The captain's face was grim, but there was determination in his eyes. "Earth's command has authorized a rescue mission," he said. "They're sending every available ship to rendezvous with us here. We'll have a fleet of 47 vessels within 18 hours. Alina felt a mixture of hope and terror. "Captain, you understand what you're taking on? This enemy has been destroying civilizations for centuries. They have technology we can't even imagine." Morrison nodded slowly. "I understand, Doctor, but someone has to try. These aliens trusted us with their final message. They're counting on us to answer their call." As Alina returned to her analysis, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to change forever. The universe was much darker and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But perhaps it was also full of potential allies, waiting for someone brave enough to answer when they called for help. The signal from the stars was growing weaker, but it was still there, still pulsing with the rhythm of a dying heartbeat. The humans would answer that call. The galaxy would discover what happened when humanity decided to fight for something greater than itself. The human response came faster than anyone had expected. Within 18 hours of Dr. Alina Martinez's discovery, 47 ships from across the Outer Rim had arrived at Kepler Station. The largest fleet in human history now floated in the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the flagship Valiant, watching the other vessels take their positions. She was a woman who had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, though she had never imagined it would come like this. The Admiral had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform was crisp and perfect, but her hands shook slightly as she reviewed the mission parameters. "Status report," Sullivan called out to her bridge crew. Commander Alex Turner, leader of the Advanced Scout Squadron, stepped forward. "All vessels are accounted for, Admiral. We have 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, 23 frigates, and 6 support ships. Total crew complement is just over 15,000. Sullivan nodded. It was an impressive force by human standards, but she knew it would be nothing against the enemy fleet that was destroying the alien homeworld. The Villani transmission had shown energy signatures from over 300 hostile vessels each, one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. Dr. Martinez had transferred to the Valiant, along with her complete analysis of the alien signal. She worked alongside Chief Engineer Ryan Carter in the ship's main laboratory, trying to understand the technology that the Villani had shared with them. The hyperspace amplification system was unlike anything in human databases, using principles of physics that human scientists had only theorized about. "The power requirements are incredible," Carter explained to Admiral Sullivan during their first briefing. "We'll need to channel the entire output of our fusion reactors through the hyperspace coils. The stress on our ships will be enormous. Some of the older vessels might not survive the journey." Sullivan studied the technical specifications that covered every surface of the laboratory. "What about the newer ships, the Valiant and the other heavy cruisers?" "They should make it," Carter replied. "But we'll arrive at the alien homeworld with our power cores completely drained. We'll have maybe 6 hours of combat capability before we start losing critical systems." Dr. Martinez looked up from her computer terminal. "There's something else you need to know, Admiral. The Villani have included detailed information about their biology and culture. They're not just asking for military help. They're sharing everything they know about themselves, their history, and their technology." "Why would they do that?" Sullivan asked. "Because they don't think they're going to survive," Martinez replied quietly. "This transmission isn't just a call for help. It's their attempt to preserve their civilization. They want someone to remember them after they're gone." The Admiral felt a chill run down her spine. The alien message wasn't just desperate, it was a final testament from a dying species. They had given humanity the tools to reach them, but they didn't really expect anyone to arrive in time. Over the next 12 hours, engineering teams worked around the clock to modify the human ships for the impossible journey. The Villani technology required fundamental changes to the hyperspace drive systems. Power conduits had to be rerouted, navigation computers reprogrammed, and structural supports reinforced to handle the massive stress of amplified spacefolding. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez coordinated the modifications across the entire fleet. She was a small woman with dark hair and intense brown eyes, known throughout the fleet for her ability to solve impossible problems. Rodriguez had never worked with alien technology before, but she approached it with the same methodical determination that had made her one of the youngest commanders in the fleet. "The modifications are complete on 32 vessels," she reported to Admiral Sullivan. "The remaining ships will be ready within 4 hours." Sullivan checked the countdown timer that now appeared on every screen throughout the fleet. Then 50 hours remained before the enemy would reach the alien homeworld. Even with the Villani technology, the journey would take 36 hours. They would arrive with barely enough time to make a difference. Commander Turner led the final preparations for his scout squadron. His 6 fastest ships would jump first, arriving at the alien system ahead of the main fleet to assess the situation. Turner was a veteran pilot with 20 years of experience, but he had never attempted anything like this before. Remember, Turner told his squadron leaders, "We're jumping into completely unknown territory. We don't know what we'll find when we get there. Stay together, gather intelligence, and try not to get killed before the main fleet arrives." The first jump was scheduled for 0800 hours, ship time. Admiral Sullivan gathered her senior staff for a final briefing as the fleet made its last preparations. The bridge of the Valiant was packed with officers, each one representing a different aspect of the mission. "We're about to attempt something that every expert said was impossible," Sullivan began. "We're going to travel 200 light years. In a day and a half, arrive in the middle of an alien war zone, and try to save a civilization that we've never met. The odds against us are astronomical." She paused, looking at each face in the room. "But we're going anyway."
Why?
"Humans do. When someone calls for help, we answer. When someone is in trouble, we don't abandon them. And when faced with impossible odds, we find a way to win." The jump sequence began at exactly 0800 hours. Turner's scout squadron vanished first, there. Ships disappearing into hyperspace with flashes of brilliant light. The main fleet followed in waves, each group of vessels jumping at carefully calculated intervals to avoid catastrophic interference. Admiral Sullivan felt the familiar sensation of hyperspace translation as the Valiant made its jump. This time was different. The ship shuddered and groaned as the amplified drive systems pushed it far beyond its normal limits. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and the sound of overstressed metal echoed through the corridors. "Status report," Sullivan called out as the ship stabilized in hyperspace. "We're holding together," reported the chief engineer. "But the power drain is worse than we calculated. We'll arrive with maybe 4 hours of combat capability instead of 6. The journey through hyperspace was unlike anything the human crews had experienced before. The amplified drive systems created strange distortions in the space around there. Ships. Colors that had no names flashed outside the viewports, and the sound of the universe itself seemed to change as they traveled between the stars. Dr. Martinez spent the journey analyzing every piece of data from the Villani transmission. The more she learned about the alien civilization, the more impressed she became. The Villani had achieved scientific breakthroughs that human researchers had only dreamed of. Their cities were works of art that floated through space like living sculptures. Their technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic, but they were losing the war. The historical records hidden in their transmission told a story of systematic destruction that had lasted for over 1,000 years. The enemy called themselves the Hegemony, and they had been wiping out intelligent species across the galaxy for generations. They didn't conquer worlds, they sterilized them, leaving nothing but empty space where civilizations had once flourished. "Do they do it?" Rodriguez asked during one of their briefings. "What's the point of destroying everything?" "From what I can understand, they see intelligence itself as a threat. They believe that any species capable of advanced thought will eventually challenge their dominance, so they eliminate potential rivals before they can become dangerous." The implications were terrifying. If the Hegemony learned about humanity, Earth itself would become a target. This rescue mission wasn't just about saving the Villani. It was about preventing human extinction. 30 hours into the journey, Commander Turner's scout squadron emerged from hyperspace near the alien homeworld. The reports they sent back to the main fleet were grim. Villani planet of Desha was already under siege, surrounded by massive enemy warships that dwarfed anything in human space. "The Hegemony fleet is even larger than we thought," Turner reported. "I count over 400 vessels, with more arriving every hour. The alien defensive systems are failing rapidly. We're looking at complete planetary bombardment within 6 hours. Admiral Sullivan felt her heart sink. Even with the full human fleet, they would be outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. The enemy ships were not only more numerous, but also more advanced. Each Hegemony vessel was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But there was something else in Turner's report that gave her hope. The Villani were still fighting. Their elegant city ships moved through space, like dancers, using speed and agility to avoid the enemy's massive weapons. They couldn't win, but they weren't giving up. "All ships prepare for combat emergence," Sullivan ordered. "We're going into the biggest fight in human history. Make it count." The main fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, appearing suddenly in the outer system, like avenging angels. The sight that greeted them was both beautiful and terrible. The human fleet spread across the battlefield like a swarm of angry wasps. their small ships darting between the massive hegemony warships with desperate speed. Admiral Sullivan watched from the bridge of the Valiant as her forces engaged an enemy that was larger, more advanced, and infinitely more experienced than anything humanity had ever faced. The Villani. City ships were beautiful, even in their death throes. Each one was a work of art, a crystalline structure that seemed to grow rather than being built. They moved through space with grace, their hulls shimmering with colors that changed as they rotated. But the hegemony weapons were tearing them apart, spilling atmosphere and debris into the void. Captain Morrison of the Aurora was among the first to reach the alien vessels. His communications officer, Lisa Powell, had been working for hours to establish contact with the Villani survivors. The translation programs were primitive, but they were enough to bridge the gap between two species that had never spoken before. "Is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Aurora?" He broadcast on all frequencies. "We received your distress signal. We're here to help." The response came from a damaged Villani ship called Harmony's Light. The voice that answered was unlike anything humans had ever heard, musical, complex, and filled with emotions that seemed to echo in harmonics. "Human vessel. This is Counselor Zethkari of the Villani Unity. We did not believe anyone would come. Your species travels far from your home to aid strangers." Morrison felt a chill run through him. The alien's words were perfect, translated by computers, but the meaning behind them was clear. The Villani had sent their distress signal without real hope of rescue. They had been prepared to die alone. "We don't abandon people who need help," Morrison replied. "What's your situation?" "Our planetary defenses are failing," Zethkari responded. "The hegemony has been destroying our world for 3 days. Most of our population centers are gone. We have perhaps 2 hours before total collapse." Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez led the first boarding party to make physical contact with the aliens. Her team of 12 Marines transferred to the Harmony's Light through docking tubes, their weapons ready, but their orders clear. These were allies, not enemies. The interior of the Villani ship was like walking through a living crystal. The walls pulsed with soft light, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with energy. The Villani themselves were tall and elegant, with skin that reflected light like oil on water. Their large eyes conveyed intelligence and a sadness that seemed to come from centuries of loss. Counselor Zethkari met Rodriguez's team in what appeared to be the ship's command center. He was nearly 7 feet tall, with long limbs and fingers that ended in delicate points. When he spoke, his voice created harmonics that seemed to resonate in the human's bones. "Your species is young," he said, studying Rodriguez with eyes that held depths of ancient knowledge. "Yet you come to fight the hegemony. Do you understand what you face?" Rodriguez looked around the command center, seeing displays that showed the tactical situation in 3 dimensions. The hegemony fleet was massive, over 400 ships, each one the size of a human city. Their weapons were beyond anything in human technology, capable of cracking planets or boiling away atmospheres. "We understand we're outmatched," Rodriguez replied. "But we're here anyway. Tell us about the enemy." Zethkari activated a holographic display that showed the history of the hegemony's advance across the galaxy. System after system fell to their weapons, each one wiped clean of intelligent life. Species that had existed for millions of years were reduced to nothing more than footnotes in the Conqueror's records. "They have been destroying civilizations for over 1,000 years, Zethkari explained. "They see intelligence itself as a threat to their dominance. Any species capable of advanced thought must be eliminated before it can challenge their authority." The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. If the hegemony learned about humanity, Earth would become their next target. This battle wasn't just about saving the Villani, it was about preventing human extinction. Meanwhile, the space battle raged around them. Colonel Ben Murphy led the human fighter squadrons in their first engagement with hegemony forces. His pilots had trained for combat against other human ships, but nothing had prepared them for this. The hegemony fighters were sleek, black vessels that moved with mechanical precision. They flew in perfect formations, their weapons firing in coordinated volleys that could overwhelm any conventional defense. But they had never fought humans before, and human pilots didn't follow conventional patterns. Murphy's squadron dove into the enemy formation with a ferocity that surprised even him. Human military doctrine emphasized speed, aggression, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing situations. The hegemony pilots were skilled, but they had been trained to fight according to rigid tactical principles. Break formation and engage. At will, Murphy ordered his pilots. Don't let them predict your movements. The human fighters scattered like leaves in a hurricane, each pilot choosing their own targets and attack patterns. The hegemony forces tried to respond, but their orderly formations began to break down as they struggled to track dozens of unpredictable enemies. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was the first human pilot to destroy a hegemony fighter. Her ship was smaller and less heavily armed than the enemy vessel, but she used her superior maneuverability to stay in the larger ship's blind spot. When she finally got a clear shot, her missiles tore through the enemy's shields like they were made of paper. "Got 'em," Kim shouted over the communications channel. "Their armor is tough, but it's not perfect." The victory was small, but it sent a wave of hope through the human fleet. The hegemony weren't invincible. They could be hurt, and they could be killed. Back on the Harmony's light, Dr. Martinez was working with Villani scientists to understand the full scope of the threat. The aliens had been fighting this war for 3 generations, slowly losing ground despite their technological advantages. Yes, they had weapons that could manipulate gravity. Yes, shields that could deflect energy attacks, and ships that could repair themselves during battle, but none of it had been enough. The hegemony adapts, explained scientist Prime Velthor, a Villani researcher whose skin showed the silver patterns of advanced age. Each time we develop a new weapon, they find a counter. Each time we discover a new tactic, they adjust their strategy. They learn from every battle, and they never make the same mistake twice. Martinez studied the tactical displays that showed the current battle. The human fleet was fighting with desperate courage, but they were taking heavy losses. 3 destroyers had already been destroyed, and the Valiant itself was showing serious damage from enemy fire. "What about their weaknesses?" Martinez asked. "Every species has vulnerabilities." Velthar's large eyes flickered with something that might have been hope. "They are too organized, too predictable. They follow patterns that have worked for 1,000 years, but they cannot adapt quickly to completely new approaches." The revelation gave Martinez an idea. She contacted Admiral Sullivan immediately, explaining what she had learned about hegemony tactics. "They're expecting us to fight like the Villani," Martinez reported. "Organized, coordinated, following established military principles. But that's not how humans fight when we're desperate." Sullivan understood immediately. Human military history was filled with victories won through unconventional tactics, surprise attacks, and the willingness to take risks that more cautious species would avoid. The hegemony had never faced an enemy that fought with such chaotic creativity. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," she broadcast to the fleet. "Abandon standard formations. Each captain is authorized to engage independently. Use whatever tactics you think will work. Make them guess what we're going to do next." Change in human tactics was immediate and dramatic. Ships that had been fighting in coordinated groups suddenly scattered across the battlefield, each one becoming an unpredictable threat. The hegemony forces tried to respond, but their rigid command structure couldn't adapt quickly enough. Commander Turner led a group of frigates in a daring attack on one of the enemy's massive command ships. The vessel was the size of a small moon, protected by shields that could deflect the combined fire of an entire fleet. But Turner had noticed something in the enemy's defensive patterns. They're rotating their shield frequencies every 30 seconds, he reported to his squadron. "If we time our attacks perfectly, we can punch through during the transition." The attack required split-second timing and perfect coordination. Turner's ships dove toward the enemy vessel from different angles, their weapons charging as they approached. When the shields flickered during their frequency change, all 6 ships fired simultaneously. The concentrated fire punched through the enemy's defenses and struck the command ship's main reactor. The explosion was visible from across the star system. a brilliant flash of light that announced the death of one of the hegemony's most powerful vessels. For the first time in the battle, the enemy formation began to show signs of confusion. Their ships pulled back from the human forces, their captains trying to understand how such a small fleet could inflict such damage. On the Harmony's light, Counselor Zethkari watched the battle with growing amazement. The temporary ceasefire came at dawn on the second day of battle. Both fleets had pulled back to lick their wounds and reassess their strategies. The human ships floated in space near the damaged Villani city ships, their hulls scarred by enemy fire, but their spirits unbroken. Admiral Sullivan had called for a meeting of all senior officers to plan their next move. The conference room aboard the Valiant was packed with both human and Villani representatives. Dr. Martinez sat next to Counselor Zethkari, their translation. Devices working overtime to bridge the gap between two very different species. The mood was grim, but determined. "We hurt them yesterday," Admiral Sullivan began, addressing the mixed group. "But we can't win this war through conventional fighting. The hegemony has too many ships, too many resources, and too much experience." Scientist Prime Velthor activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of the enemy empire. Star systems stretched across the galaxy, each one marked with the symbol of hegemony control. Billions of ships, trillions of soldiers, and weapons that could destroy entire worlds. "They have been building this empire for over 1,000 years, Velthor explained. "Every species they destroy adds to their strength. Every world they conquer provides more resources for their war machine." Captain Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "There has to be a weakness. No empire is perfect, no matter how large it was." Becomes Counselor Zethkari's skin patterns shifted to show deep thought. The hegemony's strength is also their weakness. They are too organized, too dependent on their central command structure. If we could strike at their leadership— "We've tried that before," interrupted Commander Velanash, a Villani military officer whose scars told of many battles. "Their command ships are too well protected, too heavily guarded." Dr. Martinez had been studying the enemy's tactical patterns during the previous day's battle. "What if we're approaching this wrong? What if we don't try to destroy their command structure, but disrupt it instead?" She pulled up her analysis on the room's main display. Hegemony coordinates their attacks through a network of communication. Relays. If we could jam or destroy those relays, their ships would lose coordination. Chief Engineer Ryan Carter studied the data with professional interest. "It's possible, but we'd need to hit multiple targets simultaneously. And we'd need to get close enough to their command ships to plant the jamming devices." Suicide. Mission, Commander Turner said quietly. "Even if we succeeded, we'd never get out alive." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. The plan might work, but it would require enormous sacrifices from both species. Major Tony Clark, leader of the Human Ground Forces, spoke up. "What about a joint operation? Human and Villani teams working together. We could use our ships to get close while the Villani provide technical support." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez nodded. "Our ships are smaller and more maneuverable. You might be able to slip past their defenses where larger vessels couldn't." Over the next 6 hours, human and Villani officers worked together to develop a comprehensive battle plan. The cultural differences between the species were significant, but their shared determination to survive created a bond that transcended language barriers. The Villani approached warfare with careful planning and elegant execution. Their tactics were based on centuries of military theory, refined through generations of conflict. They fought with precision and grace, using their superior technology to maximum advantage. Humans, on the other hand, thrived on chaos and improvisation. Their military doctrine emphasized speed, aggression, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. They were willing to take risks that more cautious species would avoid. The combination of both approaches created something entirely new. Villani technology merged with human creativity, producing strategies that neither species could have developed alone. Specialist Dana Brooks, a human computer expert, worked with Villani technicians to develop new electronic warfare capabilities. The aliens' understanding of quantum communication was centuries ahead of human knowledge. If human hackers had developed techniques for infiltrating computer systems that the Villani had never imagined. Their security is incredibly sophisticated, Brooks explained to a mixed group of technicians. But it's designed to stop conventional attacks. They've never faced anyone who fights dirty. The first joint operation targeted a hegemony supply convoy that was moving through a nearby star system. The mission would test the new human-Villani cooperation and provide valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities. Commander Turner led a squadron of 6 human ships, each one carrying a team of Villani technical specialists. The aliens were nervous about the human approach to warfare, but they were eager to learn new tactics that might help them survive. The convoy consisted of 12 massive transport ships protected by an escort of 36 fighters. Under normal circumstances, it would have been suicide for 6 small ships to attack such a force. But the human pilots had learned to use unpredictability as a weapon. Member Turner told his squadron, "We're not trying to destroy the entire convoy. We hit the command ship, grab what intelligence we can, and get out before they can organize a response." The attack began at maximum range, with the human ships diving toward the convoy from 6 different directions. The hegemony escorts moved to intercept, but their formations were disrupted by the chaotic nature of the human assault. Lieutenant Sarah Kim's ship was the first to break through the enemy screen. Her Villani passenger, a young technician named Kethmar, used his species' advanced sensors to identify the convoy's command vessel. "There," Kethmar said, his voice tight with excitement. "A large ship in the center. It carries the coordination computers for the entire convoy." Kim's ship dove toward the target, dodging enemy fire with a grace that amazed her alien passenger. The human pilot seemed to anticipate the enemy's moves, twisting and turning through space as if she were dancing rather than fighting. "How do you know where they will shoot?" Kethmar asked. "I don't," Kim replied, pulling her ship through a turn that would have been impossible for a larger vessel. "But I know where I would shoot if I were them, so I make sure I'm not there." The concept was foreign to Villani thinking, but it worked. Kim's ship reached the enemy command vessel and launched a boarding pod containing a mixed human-Villani team. The aliens provided the technical expertise to infiltrate the ship's computer systems, while the humans used their talent for improvisation to overcome unexpected obstacles. The mission was a complete success. The boarding team retrieved detailed intelligence about hegemony fleet movements, communication protocols, and most importantly, the location of their regional command center. But the real victory was more subtle. The joint operation had proven that humans and Villani could work together effectively, combining their different strengths to achieve results that neither species could accomplish alone. Word of the successful mission spread quickly through both fleets. Other alien species, scattered survivors of the hegemony's genocidal campaign, began to emerge from hiding. They had been monitoring the battle at Desha, waiting to see if the humans and Villani could actually stand against their oppressors. The first to make contact was a species called the Korathi, reptilian beings who had been hiding in asteroid fields for over 2 centuries. Their leader, General Skater, brought news of other survivors scattered across the galaxy. "We thought we were the last," Skater explained through a translation device. "But your victory has given us hope. Other species are beginning to stir. The hegemony's grip on the galaxy may not be as strong as we believed." Dr. Martinez worked with representatives from multiple species to understand the full scope of the resistance movement. The hegemony had been so successful in their campaign of extermination that most survivors had assumed they were alone. But the human arrival had changed everything. "How many species are still out there?" Martinez asked. "We know of at least 23s that have managed to survive in hiding," replied Velthor. "Perhaps more. The hegemony believes they destroyed us all, but some of us learned to hide in places they would never think to look." The revelation transformed the entire conflict. This wasn't just a battle between 2 fleets. It was the beginning of a galaxy-wide uprising against 1,000 years of oppression. Admiral Sullivan called another meeting of senior officers, this time including representatives from 5 different species. The diversity was remarkable: reptilian Karathi, crystalline Threnody, gas-based Nebulans, and others, each one bringing their own unique capabilities to the growing alliance. "We have an opportunity here," Sullivan told the assembled group. "The hegemony thinks they're fighting a small rebel force. They don't realize that we're part of something much larger." The plan that emerged from that meeting was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Instead of trying to defeat the hegemony through conventional warfare, they would coordinate simultaneous uprisings across multiple star systems. The enemy's forces would be stretched too thin to respond effectively. Each species would contribute their unique abilities to the campaign. The Karathi could phase through solid matter, making them perfect for infiltration missions. The final assault on the hegemony homeworld began at dawn on the 7th day after humanity's arrival. Captain Morrison, now commanding the Joint Task Force flagship Unity, looked out at the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 237 ships from 15 different species floated in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that represented the combined knowledge of dozens of civilizations. The hegemony, capital world of Dominion Prime, hung before them like a metallic planet, surface covered with weapons, platforms, and defensive shields that could destroy entire star systems. The enemy had turned their homeworld into the ultimate fortress, protected by orbital defense grids that had never been breached in over 1,000 years of warfare. Admiral Sullivan stood beside Morrison on the bridge of the Unity, watching the tactical displays that showed the enemy's defensive positions. The hegemony had pulled back their scattered fleets to protect their capital, creating a concentration of military power that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Status report," Sullivan called out to her mixed crew of humans and aliens. Commander Turner, now leading the combined fighter squadrons, stepped forward. "All attack groups are in position, Admiral. We have 147 fighters ready for the first wave, plus support from the Karathi stealth ships and the Threnody gravity manipulators." Dr. Martinez worked frantically at her station, making final adjustments to the biological weapon that would be the key to their victory. Months of research with Villani scientists had produced something unprecedented: a virus that could target the neural implants connecting every member of the hegemony species to their collective consciousness. "The weapon is ready," Martinez reported, "but we need to get it into their atmospheric processors to ensure galaxy-wide distribution. The delivery system will have to penetrate their deepest defenses." The plan was incredibly complex, requiring precise coordination between species that had never worked together before. The first phase would involve simultaneous attacks on 12 different fronts, stretching the enemy's defenses to their breaking point. Then, while the hegemony forces were distracted, a small team would infiltrate the planet's core systems and deploy the biological weapon. Counselor Zethkari of the Villani had volunteered to lead the infiltration team, along with Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez and a group of specialists from 6 different species. They would use a combination of Karathi phasing technology, Threnody gravity manipulation, and human improvisation to reach the planet's central processing facility. Member Zethkari addressed the infiltration team. "We are not trying to destroy the hegemony. We are trying to free them. The biological weapon will sever their connection to the collective consciousness, but it will not harm them physically." Rodriguez checked her equipment one final time. "What happens when they start thinking for themselves?" "They've been part of a hive mind for thousands of years. That is what we hope to discover," Zethkari replied. "Perhaps without the collective, driving them to destroy, they will choose a different path." The battle began with a massive coordinated assault on the planet's outer defenses. Human ships dove toward the enemy positions with their characteristic aggression, while Villani vessels used their superior technology to target key systems. The Karathi fighters phased through solid shields, peering inside enemy formations to cause maximum chaos. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led her squadron through the maze of defensive platforms, her ship dancing between energy beams that could have vaporized her in an instant. Behind her, a Threnody pilot named Christo used gravity manipulation to crush enemy weapons before they could fire. "This is incredible," Kim shouted over the communications channel. "I can't believe we're actually doing this." Diversity of the Allied fleet was its greatest strength. Every time the hegemony adapted to one type of attack, a completely different species would strike from an unexpected angle. The Nebulans flowed through enemy ships like living clouds, disrupting their electronic systems. The aquatic followers used water-based weapons that the hegemony had never encountered before. Major Clark coordinated the ground assault teams that would follow the infiltration group. His forces included human marines, Karathi warriors, Volani technicians, and specialists from a dozen other species. They had trained together for weeks, learning to work as a unified force despite their vast differences. All ground teams prepare. For insertion, Clark commanded. Remember, we're not conquering this world. We're liberating it. Once the biological weapon takes effect, these people will be our allies, not our enemies. The infiltration team launched from the Unity in a specially modified ship that combined the stealth technology of 6 different species. Rodriguez piloted the vessel through the maze of defensive fire, using every trick she had learned during her years in space. Karathi phasing in 3.1. Mark, called out Skell, the reptilian warrior who controlled the ship's phase generators. The vessel flickered out of normal space, becoming incorporeal just long enough to pass through a massive energy barrier. The planet's surface was a nightmare of industrial construction, with manufacturing facilities that stretched from horizon to horizon. The hegemony had turned their homeworld into a factory for producing weapons of mass destruction, fed by the resources of 1,000 conquered worlds. But as the infiltration team moved deeper into the planet's core systems, they began to see something unexpected. Hidden beneath the industrial wasteland were the remains of a beautiful civilization. Cities of art and culture that had been buried under centuries of military construction. "Look at this," whispered Dr. Martinez, as they passed through an ancient gallery filled with sculptures and paintings. They weren't always like this. Before the collective consciousness, they were artists and philosophers. The discovery gave new urgency to their mission. The biological weapon wasn't just about stopping the hegemony's war machine, it was about freeing an entire species from 1,000 years of mental slavery. The central processing facility was a massive complex at the planet's core, surrounded by the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. The infiltration team used every technique they had learned, phasing through walls, manipulating gravity to bypass sensors, and using human cunning to solve problems that alien technology couldn't handle. Rodriguez found herself working alongside beings she had never imagined just weeks before. The Karathi warrior Skell could walk through solid matter, while the Threnody engineer Vorthok could make objects weightless with a thought. The diversity was staggering, but somehow they worked together perfectly. There Zethkari pointed to a massive chamber filled with processing equipment. The atmospheric control systems. If we can introduce the biological weapon here, it will spread to every hegemony world within hours. The final approach required split-second timing. Rodriguez used her piloting skills to navigate through a maze of security systems, while her alien teammates disabled sensors and redirected power flows. Dr. Martinez prepared the biological weapon for deployment. Her hands steady, despite the enormous pressure. "Weapon deployed," Martinez reported as the virus began spreading through the facility's air systems. "Galaxy-wide distribution will begin in approximately 30 minutes. The effect was almost immediate. Throughout the facility, hegemony workers began to stop their tasks, confusion replacing the mechanical efficiency they had shown for generations. For the first time in 1,000 years, they were thinking as individuals rather than as parts of a collective mind. Above them, the space battle was reaching its climax. The hegemony fleet was beginning to show signs of coordination breakdown as their command structure struggled to adapt to the biological weapon's effects. Ships that had moved in perfect formation just hours before now wandered aimlessly. There, crews struggling to understand what was happening to them. Admiral Sullivan watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. "They're not fighting back," she reported to the fleet. "The enemy ships are powering down their weapons." The first surrender came from a massive hegemony battleship that had been leading the defense of the planet. Its captain, speaking in a voice filled with confusion and wonder, broadcast a message that would echo through history. This is Commander Vexther, of the hegemony vessel Dominion's fist. I request permission to surrender. We do not wish to fight anymore. We do not understand why we ever wanted to destroy you. Similar messages began flooding the communication channels as hegemony ships throughout the system laid down their arms. The collective consciousness that had driven them to genocide for 1,000 years was breaking down, placed by individual minds that were horrified by what they had been forced to do. Captain Morrison found himself accepting the surrender of beings who had been his enemies just hours before. The hegemony soldiers were tall, elegant creatures with pale skin and large eyes that now showed emotions they had never been allowed to feel. "We remember," one of them said, his voice barely a whisper. "We remember what we were before the collective. We were poets and scientists and artists. What have we become?" The rehabilitation process began immediately.